Let's give him our best ears, our best attention. Like, really, he's got a word from the Lord. I know he does. And so we want to really listen. And Kaleb, we appreciate you. You're wearing your speech and debate. You're fully qualified because of Jesus and speech and debate to preach to us. He's a good public speaker. Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You see, I think I had too much. You see, I think I had too much coffee over the past couple days. I'm getting a little jittery. So, anyway, good little message there, because it kind of plays into mine a little bit. A little bit. It's not a stretch that it's a comparison. So, who here knows, like, who was here? No, before I get to that. Who was here last time when I preached? Several people. Okay. Well, when I get to the end, you might start recognizing it, or towards the beginning. You probably won't recognize the middle. Anyway, who knows what the Lord's temple is? Yes, a couple people? Couple people? Well, the Lord's temple is a place. It is in our hearts, it's in our minds, and it's where the Lord lives, because the Lord lives inside of us. And it's extremely important to have a beautiful temple because it shows. It shows to the people around you, and it shows to those that pay attention. Have you guys heard of show your light in the darkness? Like, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm not even a good singer. But the thing is, that light is the Lord's temple inside of you. And so when I was reading Isaiah 5, 1 through 7, I got a good idea called the garden example. And the garden example consists of 5 parts. The first of the location, 2 of the high ground and the fertile ground. So what the first part is talking about is how you have to be in a good spot to build the temple. You have to have, I'll get into this in just a couple minutes, but you have to have the high ground and the fertile land in order to have the fruits and the flowers of the Spirit. Fruits of the Spirit, the love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. You have to have fertile ground in order for those to grow. And so you need to make sure that you're building a beautiful temple and that you're having the Lord's temple on fertile ground inside of your mind and inside of your heart. The second part is building a wall. You have to build a wall around your garden in order to protect your garden, because the devil is always going to be attacking you. He's always going to have another fiery arrow to send your way. And so you have to build a wall to help keep him out. And if you go back to part 1 where you're talking about high ground, the reason you want to build your temple on high ground is because if you build it in the bottom of a valley, or if you build it on the bottom of a cliff, you give the devil, in a sense, another way to attack you. And another, avenue of attack? I don't know. I have it phrased better later. But if you go to the third part, it's build a watchtower. You build a watchtower in the middle of your garden so that you can see what is coming your way. You can see and prepare for what the devil is sending your way. And the fourth is care of the garden. But what's in the garden? In the garden are plants, flowers. I like flowers, so I'm saying love is a flower. So you have the flower of love, the flower of joy, the flower of peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Now, with caring for the garden, you care for it very similarly to how you actually care for a flower. You got to prune the flowers. You have to cut off anything that is perverted. You have to cut off anything that is not right. You have to pull out the weeds that are growing in your garden. And you also need to water your garden, because if you don't water your garden, your flowers cannot grow. They can't become what they're meant to be. And your temple, of which the Lord is living inside of you, can't grow to its potential. And so in order to have a beautiful temple, you really have to care for the flowers inside of your garden by pruning the flowers. Because if you cut off the head of a rotten flower, you give an opportunity for the flower to grow back beautifully, right? But if you don't prune it, it just sits there, dead, limp, rotting, disgusting. And so you have to prune it. You have to weed the garden and water the garden. Because when you do these things, you're taking care of the garden. And you're promoting love in your heart. You're promoting joy and peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance inside of you. And you're allowing others who see you to perceive you as a Christian as something that is beautiful, something that is to be desired. And now we have to go to the fifth part, which is maintenance of the wall. Because what happens if you take a hammer and you just hit a brick, and you hit the brick again, and you hit the brick again, and hit it, and hit it, and hit it? Well, eventually, that brick is going to break. You're going to make it through the brick. And so you have to keep up building the wall. You have to remind yourself of the love and the fear of the Lord that you built the wall. And you need to just keep adding another layer of wall. You need to build the wall higher, because what happens if I build a wall right here? Okay, there's a wall. Can you get to me? Can't you go over the wall? Can't you go around the wall? Can't you go under the wall? Well, the point is that you have to continue increasing the size of the wall. Because the devil isn't just going to say, oh, well, he has a wall. I'm not going to do anything. No, the devil is going to try its hardest to get at you. And he's going to fire his fiery arrows at you, and he's going to try to get to you as quickly and as efficiently as he can. He's not going to just stop because, oh, he has a wall. No, he's going to try to figure a way through the wall, over the wall, around the wall, or under the wall. And so you need to maintain the wall by feeding it, by feeding your heart and your mind, by continually praying and reading the Bible and nourishing the flowers of the garden, by cleaning your garden, and by maintaining the wall. And then also the Watchtower, so you can see all the fiery arrows and where they're going and where you need to repair. Well, it's called a Watchtower, not a defense tower.
You can still shoot off of it.
Okay, well, you see, I can separate this into 5 sections, because it has 5 sections to the garden example. So let's go to the first example, where the first part, where we're talking about location. So when we're talking about location, we're talking, of course, about where the temple is located. We're talking about our hearts, and we're talking about our minds, right? Well, first of all, it is extremely important that, all right, skip the part. Can anybody tell me why it is important to have the heart and the mind to be, in a sense, pure or for the Lord? Is that important? Can you tell me why, someone? Very important. There we go. It's extremely important that you focus on maintaining your, in a sense, purity of your heart and your mind. And this is important because if your heart is hard, then what can you do for the Lord? If you look to Pharaoh, for example, who enslaved the Jews, if you go to, I think, Exodus 20-ish, somewhere in there, where there's the plagues, Wait 1 second. Exodus 7. 7 and then Exodus 9. Anyway, well, you have the 9 plagues.
It's raining
1,
toes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have the 8 plagues, 9 plagues in there. You have the plagues of Egypt, right? Well, after every single plague, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he continued to enslave the Jews. Well, that's not what the Lord wanted. The Lord wanted for the Jews to be freed. But Pharaoh's heart was, of course, hardened. And so one thing that we need to do in order to set up the location to build the temple is we have to soften our hearts. And we have to make sure that we do not have a hardened heart. And we also need to make sure that our mind is not argumentative for the Lord. And I am a debater, and I do argue a lot. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about argumentative. When we're talking about being argumentative, it's talking about being argumentative with the Lord and debating with the Lord about what he tells you and debating about the Lord about how you do things and just in general being argumentative and not supportive isn't necessarily the right word, but yeah. Well, there's 2 things you need to have in order to have and build. Before you build the Lord's temple, you need to make sure that your heart and your mind is, in a sense, in the right place. And in order to have your heart and the mind in the right place, you need 2 things. You need your heart and the mind built upon high ground. I call this the view from the high ground. You got a beautiful view if you are on top of a hill. So do you guys know why high ground is important versus in the bottom of a valley?
I can see the enemy coming.
Good. So you can see the enemy coming. Or because, has anyone been to the east side of JVC? Where you have the river and then you have the banks? Yeah? Yeah, well, you have the river, right? And on the banks of each side of the river, it's very steep, right? So if you go in a boat and you're going down the river, you're just sitting there fishing, I don't know what you're doing, just sitting there going down the river, you can't necessarily see what's on the top of the hill. You can't see what is past the valley. You can't see past it. But when you're on top of a hill, you can see everything. So it's extremely important where you build your temple and where your heart is, because if your heart is in a place where it's not receptive to what the Lord is saying, if your heart is in a place where you're not able to perceive the enemy, if your heart is in a place where you're not receiving from the Lord, your temple is never going to succeed. Because you need to build your temple where it's going to be most effective. You need to build your temple in your heart and your mind when it's in a sense a good season. That's permanent, like seasons are permanent in my examples, permanent seasons. You need to build it in the best season. You need to build it in the best part possible. And you also need to build it in fertile ground. Because if you build it, in a sense, in a desert where nothing is going to grow, well, of course, that's not going to be good for your garden, because your garden needs nutrients, it needs water, it needs the minerals of the dirt. Well, the same thing for your fruits of the Spirit. Your fruits of the Spirit need nutrients through reading the Bible and through praying. And so, before you build the temple of the Lord, you need to make sure that you do a couple things. The first part is you need to be in a place where you can perceive what the Lord is telling you. You need to be in a place where you can perceive where the enemy is. You need to be able to perceive, in a sense, You need to perceive what is wrong. Because if you go to Luke 19, 1 through 10, you're talking about, what's his name? The tax collector, the Zacchaeus. Wait, no. Is that right? Yeah, Zacchaeus. And what happened there is that the Lord shared the gospel with Zacchaeus, a sinner. And the big point is that anybody can be perceptive to the Lord. Muslims, Buddhist, Hinduist. You can all be perceptive to the Lord. But that's a different thing. I got confused. Anyway. When you're building the temple of the Lord, you need to have two things. You need to be able to perceive the Lord, and you need to be able to, grow the fruits of the Spirit and be susceptible to what the Lord is telling you. You need to obey the Lord, and you need to nourish your garden. And if we go back to the fertile ground, where you're talking about being susceptible to the Lord, your garden needs to be fertile in order for the fruit of the Lord to grow. And if your heart and your mind have not produced the desirable fruits, then you need to become a baby. Because if you go back to Matthew 11:25 and Matthew 18:2 through 5 and Matthew 21:16, it's all talking about how a baby has perfect praise, and how a baby is, in a sense, a perfect example of what we should all be. Because a baby has total faith. It has total trust in its mother. That baby will do almost anything that the mother wants. That's not exactly right. But the point is that the baby, I can't think of the word. The baby loves the mother, and the baby isn't, its viewpoint isn't perverted by So a grown person, for instance, has their own viewpoints, has their own view of how the world should be and what the world is. And they go through the world with, oh my goodness, I'm not making good notes. Anyway. So when you go through life, you develop your own viewpoints, you develop your own way of viewing the world, right? But the thing is that if your heart and your mind are not producing the fruits of the Spirit and they're not being effective, if they're not producing love, joy, peace, I don't have them memorized, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance, you need to do something about that. You need to make sure that you are producing these fruits. You need to make sure that you are having fertile ground, and by becoming a baby, by starting over, and by starting in a point where you can perceive the Lord clearly, and by going to a point where the ground is fertile and your fruits of the Spirit, your flowers, can grow to its full maturity and grow to its full potential, you have to become a baby, because I love babies. Babies are amazing.
Yes.
You know what? I'm going to get my Bible, because silly me forgot to bring it up here. Silly me. Go to Matthew 11:25. And at the time Jesus answered and said, I thank you, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden those things from the wise and prudent, and have revealed them to babes. Now if you go to Matthew 18, 2 through 5. And Jesus called a little child to him, and set him up in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say to you, except you be changed and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall be humbled himself as a little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receives me. And so what this is talking about is, if, say, I grew up as a Muslim, right? I grew up as a Muslim and I was converted to Christianity, right? If I don't start over with my maturity level, if I don't start from a new beginning, then it's not really going to work. If I see you sleeping, Moses. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that in order to have a truly beautiful temple of the Lord, you have to get rid of what the world is trying to teach you. Because if you go on Instagram or Facebook, or I don't think, does Snapchat have it where you can like scroll the videos things like TikTok? Or I don't know. I'm not really on Snapchat. Anyway, the thing is that they don't produce good fruits in your heart. What they do is produce lots of weeds that you need to pull out later. It produces lots of extra work that you need to do in order to have a beautiful temple, and in order to have thriving fruits and flowers in the garden. See, I'm not the best speaker. I'm just persistent. Anyway, so if we go to the second part of what I call the garden example, which is talking about the Lord's temple, I'm going to do a lot of reading. So just, listen. I don't know how I'm going to do this. If you want to follow along with me, you can go to Exodus 16. And they took their journey from Elim, and all of the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, in the 15th day of the second month after the departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord, and in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For you have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Then said the Lord to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day. And I may prove them, whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in. And he shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Israel, At evening, then you shall know that the Lord has brought you out from the land of Egypt. And in the morning, then you shall see the glory of the Lord, for that he hears your murmurs against the Lord. And that which are we, that you murmur against us? And Moses said, This shall be, when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full. And for the Lord hears your murmurs, which you murmur against him. And what are we? Your murmuring are not against us, but against the Lord. And Moses spoke to Aaron, saying, To all the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your murmuring. And it came to pass, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, At evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be full with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it came to pass that at evening the quails came up to the covering the camp. And in the morning the dew lay around about the hosts. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, It is manna, for they knew not what it was. And Moses said to them, This is the bread which the Lord God given you to eat. So what we can see in this first part of Exodus 15 is that the Israelites had just came out of Egypt. In Egypt, where they were given sufficient food, where they could eat bread to the full, and they were in the wilderness with starvation, where they were having trouble eating, they were having trouble gathering food so they could have proper nourishment. And so they started murmuring against Jesus and against the leadership, which was Moses and Aaron and those around him. But the thing is, the Lord provided for the Israelites. He provided for the Jews by giving them manna and by giving them quails. And if we read on to the end of chapter 16, we can see a foreshadow of, and the children of Israel did eat manna for 40 years until they came to the land inhabited. They did not eat manna until they came to the borders of the land of Canaan. So they didn't actually start the 40-year sentence then, but it's kind of a foreshadow. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, the thing is that the Lord provided for the Israelites. This is establishing the blessing of the Lord for the Israelites. Now, if we turn to Exodus 24:12 through 18. And the Lord said to Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give you tablets of stone, and a law, and commandments which I have written, and you may teach them. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua and Moses went up into the mount of God. And he said to the elders, Tarry you here for us, and so we come again to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to you, let them come to them. And Moses went up into the mount, on a cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the seventh day he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount, in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud, and got him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. So what this establishes is a timeline of the entire story of, in a sense, the Exodus from Egypt. Now let's go to Exodus 32, 1 through 6. I promise this will all make sense once I get to my more thorough examination and explanation. 32, 1 through 6. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come out of the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, Make us gods which shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him. And Aaron said to him, Break off the golden earrings which are on your ears of your wives and of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them to me. All of the people broke off their golden earrings, which were upon their ears, and brought them to Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graven tool. After he had made it a molten calf, and they said, "These be your gods, O Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt." And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast of the Lord." What this is justification for the curse that was foreshadowed in Exodus 16, where they had to serve 40 years in the wilderness. So what we can see here is several things. We can see, one, that the Lord established his blessings upon the Israelites, and he also has established fear. Fear, because if we go back to somewhere in Exodus 24, in that area, the Lord told Moses that do not make graven images, do not make gods before you, etc., etc., etc. But what happened is that Moses went up on the mount in a pillar of smoke and fire, and it was a sight to see, let me tell you, because people were afraid. But what the people did is they took the gold off their ears and upon the bracelets that were on the wives and daughters and sons, and made an image, a golden calf, and made an altar before the Lord. Well, what just happened? The Israelites blatantly disregarded a law that Jesus made. That is justification for the punishment that the Lord gave the Israelites, which was 40 years in the wilderness. And so, two things we can clearly see. We can see a love of the Lord through his blessings, and we can see a fear of the Lord through disregard of his laws and through the curse or punishment he will give for that. And if we go back to the garden example, I have it right here. So nice. I have a second copy. Don't have to turn pages. If we go to the second part of the garden example, you have to build a wall. Well, build a wall on what? You have to build a wall based upon love and fear. And you have to build that wall in a good place. You have to build the garden in a spot that is fertile. And you have to build a wall in a place that will be most effective. Will a wall be effective in the bottom of a valley? Not really. You can kind of... Anyway, the thing is, you need to build a wall to keep the devil out and to keep the fiery arrows of which he will send out of your garden. So, there's several things that we can see here today. We can see two things that are extremely important. One is that you have a fertile heart. And you have a heart that will receive the word of the Lord. So once you're in a mindset where you can hear from the Lord and where your heart and mind can actually provide the nutrients to your flowers through wanting to read the Bible and through wanting to spend time with the Lord, then you need to start building a wall. Building a wall based upon love for the Lord and based upon fear for the Lord. Now, one way that you develop a love for the Lord and that you develop a fear for the Lord is by reading the examples given in the Bible. One of the good examples is the example I just read with the Israelites, but there's many other examples. And if you keep reading the Bible and you keep praying to the Lord, then you will develop more love for the Lord, and you'll develop more fear for the Lord. And when you do this, you're building a bigger wall. right? Bigger wall is always better because a bigger wall has more chance of keeping those fire arrows from going over the top. And in my case, fire arrows can go under too. So just build it deeper and build it in a good spot. And if we go to the third part of the garden example, you need to build a watchtower. Because once you build a watchtower, you can see the fire arrows that are coming your way. And you can help defend against the attacks of the devil. The fourth, you need to make sure you're caring for your garden. You need to make sure that you're caring for the flowers that you've planted inside of the garden, okay? And these flowers are the fruits of the garden, which is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. These are the flowers, fruits of the Spirit, that are planted inside your heart. It's what makes the temple of the Lord so beautiful. But the thing is that you need to make sure that it's actually beautiful by maintaining the garden, by pruning the flowers, by weeding the garden, and by watering the garden. And fifth, we need to maintain the wall. If you go back to how the wall was built, it was built based upon love and fear. So you can't just read the Bible and say, oh, there's an example of a blessing here, there's an example of a fear here. You need to actually apply it. You need to apply it by giving it, in a sense, giving it merit, giving it reason to have, I can't use merit again, it's given a definition of merit. But you need to go back to the Bible, and you need to keep reading the examples. Because when you keep reading the examples that the Lord has given you in the Bible, you will help repair the wall, and you will help repair the damage that that Satan and the devil is trying to make through your wall. And so, if the first thing you need to do, if you haven't already, is you need to prepare your heart, and you need to prepare your mind. If you're in an area where you want to do this, do it by becoming a baby. Because when you become a baby, you become more susceptible to what the Lord is actually trying to tell you and what the Lord is actually trying to do with you. And when you become a baby, the land that your heart and your mind is at is much more fertile. It's much more susceptible to the words the Lord is giving you. And let me tell you, when your heart and your mind is fertile for the Lord, and when you're hearing the Lord, it's much better than being more prudent in wisdom and not hearing the Lord. Because I think it's in Matthew. Maybe it's not. But the Pharisees were considered to be very wise and prudent men. They were also considered to be, Pharisees, godly men. But the thing is, were they people of peace? Let me go back to over here. Were they a person of peace? Because if you go back to location, if you are a person of peace, you are someone who can see the army that is heading your way. You are someone who can see the fiery arrows that are fired your way. And Joseph is a really good example of someone who is a person of peace. Yeah, could expand on that, but I'm getting a little tired. Anyway, so 1, if you want to have a good location, become a baby. Because when you become a baby, you can have more fertile ground where your fruits of the Spirit can grow. And you can become a baby by reading the Bible more and praying with the Lord more and having a beautiful temple for the Lord. So, yeah. 10 minutes early, 12 minutes early, but yeah. Thank you.
Oh, no, you did amazing. I was like taking notes here. You guys, this was amazing word. You know, Caleb was saying, I took some notes and some of my big takeaways. I mean, there were so many great details. But you guys, your life, what is Caleb saying? Your whole life is like a garden, right? And you have to protect your heart, the garden of your life. You have to, and the fear of the Lord and the love of the Lord, that was one of my favorite things he talked about, is how the fear of God, meaning like, God's not Santa Claus. We respect God. Now, do we love God? And is he a father? Oh, yeah, totally. But he, like, has anyone seen Narnia? Where they talk about Aslan, the lion, okay? And they're like, oh, I love Aslan. He's so powerful. And they're like, he's such a good lion. And then someone says, but he's not a tame lion. What does he say? They're talking about like God's character. Like he's not docile. He is like strong. And so I loved what he said about the fear of God, meaning we respect God. If God says something, it's yes, sir. If he says, listen, no sex before marriage, that's going to hurt you. Wait till you're married. Yes, sir, you're right. Anything that I'm thinking that's different than that, I'm wrong. You're right. And so the fear of God, which is the respect, the honor of the Lord, and then the love of God. I loved that because those two together, because I obey God 90% of the time. I just obey him because I love him. But when my love fails me, the fear of God catches me. It's like, whoa, right now I may not be feeling a strong love, but I fear him. And so I'm going to obey him. And that fear of God and love of God is like a strong wall around your life that's going to protect your heart and keep you in the right place. I loved that word. Why don't you guys stand up right now? I want us to pray and respond to it. You guys, nothing is more important than what's going on the inside of you with you and God. Nothing. Nothing's more important to protect. When you start feeling, and all of us, have you ever felt this? All of a sudden you start feeling hard inside. You told a few lies to your parents and it used to bug you, but not so much anymore. And then a few words that you shouldn't say come out at school and it used to really that bugged you. And then all of a sudden, well, it's not that big a deal anymore. And you start feeling that's a hardness in our heart. But there's nothing more important in your life than to protect the tenderness of your conscience, the tenderness of your heart. And so right now, I just want us to respond to the Lord. If you want God to give you a tender heart or a more tender heart, I just want you to raise your hand right now, and we're just going to pray together a prayer. So if you want your heart to be tender to the Lord so you can hear him and feel how he feels, okay, let's keep our hand up. Jesus, come. I just want you to say this. Say, Jesus. Just say it out loud. Jesus. Say it out loud. Jesus. We want a tender heart. Like a little baby. We want a heart that you can love, and a heart that pleases you, and a heart that's obedient. And right now we ask you to make us tender, to make us soft. And Lord, we ask you to help us build a wall of the fear of the Lord and the love of the Lord around our lives.